Hello, everybody. We're going to give things just a second to get started here, so hold on tight for a minute while we get things started. All right, welcome everybody. We're glad to have you all here. We're excited to be doing another Instagram live tonight.
Yeah. Tonight we're going to be talking about this phrase, the only true church, or only true and living church, as it is in Doctrine and Covenants. Kind of what it means, what it meant in Joseph Smith's time, and how we should be thinking about it nowadays. So let's jump in. Why don't you give us the history of what it meant in Joseph's time?
Yeah, okay. So there's kind of a paradigm to have here, which is that when Joseph Smith was writing, things that are in the Doctrine and Covenants and otherwise, he wrote things that were common to him. He wrote phrases that he knew. He wrote idioms that were popular at the time, much like if you or I or anybody was writing something now, we would write with the vocabulary and the phrases that we use today. And so this is pretty well established. You can go look this up in a variety of places. Philip Barlow wrote about this in Wayfair. But the phrase true and living was a phrase that showed up other places. So this in the 1800s. Mm-hmm. So this was not unique to Joseph Smith or to Doctrine and Covenants section 1. This was just a phrase that was used. And he cites, let me see if I can pull it up here, that Joseph actually used the same phrase in a letter to Emma Smith.
This is Philip Barlow citing this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And Joseph Smith said in the letter, "You must comfort yourself knowing that God is your friend in heaven and that you have one true and living friend on earth, your husband, Joseph Smith Jr." So he uses this phrase in other contexts, not about the church. Sometimes we start to dissect, like, what does the true part mean and what does the living part mean? And it's possible that he wasn't really using it at that kind of level of detail, mm-hmm. but it was just a phrase that meant, like, in this letter, like, your really good friend, your best friend.
Your bosom buddy.
Yeah, right. And so you start to look at it and say, when Joseph Smith said, you have one true and living friend, does that mean she did not have other friends? And you can start to pick that apart and be like, well, maybe it's not quite the exclusive phrase that we thought it was.
Yeah. So it would be interesting. I don't know if you did any of this research, but it'd be interesting to know when that phrase kind of took a turn in our church of meaning that we are the only true church. Do you have that history?
I did do a little bit of research there. If you look back through General Conference talks, this sounds like you set me up.
Maybe.
She literally did not know, but of course I did the research. If you look back through General Conference talks, and I don't remember who it was, but in the 1850s is the first time that the phrase only true church is used.
1850s?
Uh-huh. So pretty far back. And so, while that may have been a phrase that was, colloquial in Joseph Smith's time, it definitely came to mean this is the one church that is true on the earth, not that long later.
So I love Restoration from Patrick Mason. There's so many good things, and he has a whole chapter about the true church. And one thing that he brings out, he brings up this history of the letter to Emma and kind of what it meant to Joseph at that time. But one point that he brings out that I think is really interesting is that as of 2020, our church had in its membership, as its membership, 0.2% of the world population.
Not 2%.
No,
but
0.2.
0.2%. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And so he's talking about, like, if we are the only true and living church of God, wouldn't there be more of us? And he's just posing these questions, and he says, he talks about how so many people if we're only 0.2% of the world population, that means that 99% of the people around the world have never heard of Joseph Smith, let alone Russell M. Nelson or David O. McKay or any other prophet or whatever. And he says, what about all those really good people, our neighbors, coworkers, and even our family members who are members of other religions or no religion at all? Can divine love, favor, and revelation really be concentrated on just 0.2% of God's children? I'm going to go with no on that one.
You can kind of theologically navigate your way around that if you want to, with work for the dead and the church is growing. But we also talk about how the church brings us joy or can bring us joy in this life. And why would that not be available to other people? So, yeah, if it's, the one true church, it is definitely very concentrated in a small portion of the population.
And if you're talking about joy, there are people outside of our faith that have joy.
Oh, for sure. Sure.
We do not own the corner. We don't own that corner of joy in the world. So, that's definitely worth thinking about as well.
Yep, I like that.
One thing that is interesting to me and maybe shows kind of my naiveness as a Latter-day Saint. I served a mission. I went around testifying to people, we are the only true church, and, with every fiber of my being, and we're not going to get into that necessarily, but just these words, this phrase that we use, I had never in my entire life heard a person from a different religion make that claim. I had only ever heard that as a Latter-day Saint thing. And that was until just a couple weeks ago. Literally, that was the first time that I heard somebody say something about them believing that their faith was the only true church on earth.
Who was it?
And it was Richard Rohr. And so I want to just share a little part. And he's talking about this claim of that is something that their church claims. He's Catholic.
Yeah. For background, he's a Franciscan priest.
Yeah.
Catholic kind of through and through.
Yeah. Went to Catholic school growing up, all of that.
But also a favorite of ours.
Yeah. So he's talking about, he's just talking about this thought. And he says, what a waste, the time we've wasted on that, trying to prove our church was the one true church. So trying to prove that the Catholic Church was the one true church. Just the very notion of one true church comes from righteousness, false justice. It's not true justice. It's trying to create justice in my mind, why my group, my city, my political party, my gender is right. We don't know how to grow up individually, so we make our group, our city, our people superior, which actually makes us less grown up and not enlightened. I think what he is referring to here is the time that we waste trying to prove that we are better than others and that we have all the truth. And what that is, and what Patrick Mason explains in his book, is that is exclusivism. Where if A is true, then B cannot be true.
Right.
And truly that is a waste of time to have those arguments, I think.
Yeah. And that's not saying the church isn't true.
Right.
That's saying, why do we need to expend so much energy on that instead of being partners with other Christians, with people of other faiths, and just, not being exclusive and not othering other people.
Right. So, I kind of lost my train of thought what I was going to say, but I think that if we're claiming truth and the only true whatever, doctrine, religion, whatever, if we're claiming that at the expense of others and to make ourselves feel superior, I think we have completely missed the boat of religion. Can we be that bold in the claim?
I think that's fair. Interestingly, I think it's something we come by sort of honestly as Latter-day Saints. Because when you go back even to the first vision and Joseph Smith's story in the Joseph Smith history, he has some fairly disparaging things to say about other churches. So I pulled the verse. It's verse 19 in Joseph Smith History, where he's asking God and Jesus Christ, who have appeared to him, which church he should join. And the verse says, "I was answered that I must join none of them, for they were all wrong." Emphasis added. And the personage who addressed me said that all their creeds were an abomination in his sight, that those professors were all corrupt, that they draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They teach for doctrines the commandments of men, having a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. Harsh words when you really read it that way. And so, do I think that every church in Joseph Smith's time was an abomination? Gosh, I hope not. Probably not.
No.
I have to assume there were, good Christians and good people of any faith, trying hard to live their religion and pastors who were trying to teach the right things and all that sort of thing. And I think we get a lot of mileage as Latter-day Saints out of this idea that, well, other churches draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. I know many people of a variety of faiths whose hearts are absolutely in the right place. So all of this to say, this is a little bit in our blood as Latter-day Saints, this kind of exclusivism angle.
It'd be really interesting to take the different versions of the first vision that Joseph shared. There's 4 versions of it, and to compare that wording and see if it's as harsh.
Oh, that's interesting.
From like time to time. I don't know. I'm not fully aware of those. So
well, and I'm not a scholar on this, but there are some things from later in Joseph Smith's life and ministry that are a lot more tempered than that. And prominent among them is the 13th Article of Faith, which, if there's anything virtuous, lovely, or good report or praiseworthy, we seek after these things, and seek ye out of the best books, and various things that come up that are very open-minded about where truth comes from, and that there may be truth coming in from other places.
Yeah. Yeah, and even in 1978, President Kimball gave a talk called God's Love for All Mankind. And he said that the great religious leaders of the world, such as Muhammad, Confucius, and the Reformers, as well as philosophers, including Socrates, Plato, and others, received a portion of God's light. Moral truths were given to them by God to enlighten whole nations and bring a higher level of understanding to individuals. And so not said in that is, they were given a portion, but as prophet, I was given it all,
Right.
They're not claiming, they're kind of living in between this exclusivism and relativism of, relativism meaning, Mormonism is true to me because I'm in the Mormon camp, and Catholicism is true to Richard Rohr because he's in that Catholic camp. And, that everything can be true to whoever wants to believe it. And so he's kind of living in the middle of that, saying these people all were given bits of truth, portion of God's light, and our leaders are in that as well.
Sure.
And we know that because we're not a finished and done church. We are we're a living church. We're going to continue to get revelation.
Right. And so this kind of opens the question, what does it mean for the church to be true? Or what does it mean for an organization to be true? Can a school be true? Can a bank be true?
It is a capital T truth.
Right. But for a church to be true, or the church to be true, does it mean that it teaches only truth, only things that are true? Because I don't think we can really make that claim. And the temple and priesthood ban is maybe a really prominent one there that was absolutely taught and turned out to not be the right thing. Does it mean that the church teaches some truth? Because I think that's true of probably every church. Does it mean that it teaches all the truth? I don't think we make a claim to having all the truth either, because things continue to be revealed. Does it mean leaders are infallible? Does it mean scriptures are inerrant? What does it really mean when we are at the pulpit bearing a testimony and saying, I know the church is true? What does it mean for the organization to be true? The things that it teaches can be true. Principles can be true. Ideas can be true. theologies can be, well, hopefully objectively true in some way, but what does it mean for the organization to be true? That's you talk about things that are in our blood. That phrase is so in our blood.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a funny phrase once you pick it apart.
Yeah. So there's a comment here as that Barb said, I hated the claim of the LDS church that they bring the only true church. So exclusive and egocentric. And it's very true. What's his name? Patrick. Couldn't remember. Patrick Mason says, according to one recent study, the statement, I stopped believing there was one true church, is the second most common reason people give for leaving the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
There you go.
So that is really hard, and it can shut people down to be in that certainty when you have questions or,
right.
Struggle. Is there room to say this is a true church and to doubt and have questions? I think that's a hard place that a lot of people are living in.
Yeah. Once it gets cracks in it, the whole thing has to go
right.
in a lot of cases. Go ahead.
Well, and I don't think it needs to be that way.
Right.
I think we feel
yes.
that it needs to be that way, and we hold it to such this high standard, but it doesn't need to be an all or nothing situation.
Yeah. Comment here from Laurie. Good to see you, Laurie. He says that's kind of a dope thought. If the restoration isn't done, this can't be the only correct, perhaps the fullest truth, depending on your views. That's a nice way to put that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most churches, if not all, have truth. I agree with you. I think if a church is teaching people to be good people, that's the primary thing here.
Yeah.
And I think that this idea of an exclusive truth claim of being the only true church, being kind of egocentric, it kind of harkens to the Zoramites in the Book of Mormon on the Rameumptom. They get up on the Rameumptom and pray. And if you remember what they would say in these prayers, they would say, Holy God, we believe that thou hast separated us from our brethren. We do not believe in the tradition of our brethren, which was handed down to them by the childishness of their fathers. We thank thee, O God, for we are a chosen people unto thee, while others shall perish. And so there's this very othering, very exclusive thing going on.
I really feel like I've heard prayers like that in church. Like not that specific, but hinting to that. And
right.
Grateful
to be in the club, and that I'm not like the other people that are out of the club. Kind of a thing.
It's really I think it's really disheartening in a way that we other and put people down from other faiths instead of celebrating the beauty and the diversity that we have across the globe.
Yeah.
There's a really cool quote from Huston Smith, a well-known scholar of religion. And this, again, is found in Restoration, Patrick Mason's book. He says, it is possible to climb life's mountains from any side, but when the top is reached, the trails converge. At base, in the foothills of theology, ritual, and organizational structure, the religions are distinct. Differences in culture, history, geography, and collective temperament all make for diverse starting points. Far from being deplorable, this is good. It adds richness to the totality of the human venture. But beyond these differences, the same goal beckons. I think that's a really interesting visual and thought, that the goal for everybody is the top of the mountain. Define top of the mountain as you want,
sure.
Right? Mm-hmm. But there's going to be different paths to get up that mountain, and goodness will take you on those paths. And so I think for me, the thing that when I read something like that spells out grace to me. Yeah. That we will not understand and we cannot comprehend the amount of grace that God will give us, that our heavenly parents are waiting to pour down on us.
Right.
Regardless of what path we take to get up there.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that we just, we all do whatever the heck we want and there's no rules. We can define all of that. That's an individual pursuit, I think, to define that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I have to believe that our parents want all of their children back, and they're not going to punish people for doing their best and trying their hardest
Yeah.
in the way that they know and understand.
Yep.
I don't think there's a spiteful parent that would do that to a child.
Yep. I agree. You know, and there's different ways to approach this. And I think all of them generally are compatible with being a faithful Latter-day Saint. I don't think there's any departure here. You know, it's not a new idea to suggest that, you know, there's a variety of religions. Do they have a common starting point? You know, do they all kind of come from the same place? Maybe we call God by different names, you know, pray in different ways, have different traditions, these sorts of things. But a lot of religions have a lot in common in terms of try to be a good person, you know, and really some general principles there. Another comment in the chat, I've always felt the strongest differentiating factor in the church was our belief that we have the priesthood keys, power of God, more so than us having the only true church. And I think that viewpoint is entirely compatible with what I just said. You can still believe that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the custodian of those covenants and ordinances and priesthood keys, while still believing that you know, people of other faiths are absolutely on the right track, and there's probably nothing more important that they can do than live their religion, just like you and me.
Yeah. With that quote bringing up, or that comment bringing up the priesthood, so Patrick in his book talks about this analogy of the world as a farm, and every religion is given a different crop to care for and to have stewardship over. And he lists a few things, and he also talks about how, like, that scripture in Doctrine and Covenants where gifts are given to everybody, but nobody has all the gifts. And so in regards to the priesthood, he says, yes, the priesthood is the power and authority of God delegated to his children on earth. It's an incomparable blessing, but that priesthood can never be self-serving and cannot be controlled nor handled only upon the principles of righteousness. Whether given through the Aaronic, Melchizedek, or temple orders, the priesthood only has any effect when practiced with Christ-like qualities of persuasion, long-suffering, gentleness, meekness, kindness, pure knowledge, and most of all, love. And, you know, he talks about if you invoke the priesthood through pride or sin, then you forfeit your authority to act in God's name. So I think that goes along with what you were saying is, yes, we have this stewardship over priesthood, and we have a responsibility to use it in a way to serve others. And that is in and out of the church. I think it's not something that we only bless church members with. Right? And so
I like that a lot.
And so that is a way that we are using a God-given power and gift to share with the rest of the farmers on the earth, you know, and they all have, every religion has kind of something that they are a steward over, that we can learn from with them. So anyway.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. And hopefully, you know, a lot of Latter-day Saints already have this mindset of being inclusive, people in other faiths, not, you know, having that arrogance, that ego that we talked about, not looking down on people of other faiths. And hopefully you haven't had these experiences. I have definitely sat in church meetings where disparaging things were said about people of other faiths and other Christian faiths even. And I think one thing that we tend to do is make sweeping generalizations about other faiths and people of other faiths. Well, no other church believes this, or, you know, all those churches and those people in those churches, they believe these other things that are weird and whatever. There was even in our ward a woman who had really disparaging things to say about grace, which is like a major piece of the atonement of Jesus Christ. And I think she was interpreting it differently and had some bone to pick with that. But I was like, what in the world is going on? What is she saying? And this particular individual says a lot of things. So that's just one of those. But let's just make sure to not be that person, and not be that person that's disparaging.
Or that religion. Right?
Yes, that don't be that church that bags on other churches, and we know it happens in our church, it happens in other churches. Let's just not be that. That's not Christ-like. That's not what Jesus Christ taught us to do, and there's really just no need.
Yeah. When I was younger, I used to remember or read that scripture in Doctrine and Covenants that says to search the best books or whatever. I don't remember the exact wording. And I always thought that meant just read the best books that come from LDS people. It was very small in my mind. And I couldn't break out of that box for a long time. But in the last, I don't know, six years or so, I have started reading people, like I read books from people that weren't LDS, but I have started reading Christian focused books from non-LDS people. And gosh, it is like going to church every time I read some of them. You know, I have learned so much and had my testimony strengthened by people outside of our faith. And I think that there's a lot of, that requires a lot of an ability to say, here's the thing that you're teaching. You believe it this way. This is what it means to me. And to not, like to not have to believe it exactly the way that they do, but I can take their concept and then apply it to me. And that's the way I can read these books and remain a member of the church and, and doing my best here.
And in my experience doing the same thing, reading books by other Christian authors that are not LDS, it's not even that common that there's something that I have to be like, oh, I see that differently. I understand that differently, because there's so much in there that is faith affirming. There is so much that we have in common, to be totally honest.
Based on love.
Right? Yeah. And the teachings of Jesus Christ, and we don't have a monopoly on those things. And so there's so much in common with a lot of other faiths, and not even just Christian faiths.
Yeah. Are you kind of wrapping up?
Kind of wrapping up.
Okay. I love this quote from Patrick Mason, talking about, we have in our church, a stewardship, as he calls it, over families. And I don't totally agree with that, because I think that we do a lot of harm to families if they are not an ideal. But what he says in here is, so he says, we find great comfort in knowing that exaltation is a family affair, that the same loving relationships that enrich life here will do so in the eternities. But the kingdom of God can't be reduced to a Norman Rockwell portrait of Thanksgiving dinner. The nuclear family can become an idol that blinds and alienates as much as it enlightens and binds. Our Heavenly Parents' plan of salvation was never focused on preserving your family so much as reconciling and exalting theirs. That is one of my all-time favorite quotes.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And if we think of who is in our Heavenly Parents' family, it is every single person on this planet.
Yep.
And, that has gone before and will come after. Everybody. And the point is to get everybody back to our Heavenly Parents. Not every LDS person, not every person that has heard the LDS doctrine, whether they've accepted it or not. It's everybody. And we cannot, with our puny human minds, comprehend what that means and what that will look like. Wow. And so I don't ever want to stay in a confined box that excludes other people.
Oh,
that's my
so
thought.
Good. So good.
There's a quote here a comment from Jenny here. Out of the best books, reminds me of things like when Nauvoo was established, one thing set up was a stage for things like Shakespeare's readings. Why? Because it's lovely, of good report, and praiseworthy.
Perfect.
So good.
Awesome. All right. Well, we appreciate you all joining. Appreciate the comments and questions. Always love hearing from you. So thanks for joining us on this topic, and we will see you next time.
See you later.